The first light of dawn crept slowly over the African savannah, spilling molten gold across the horizon. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of dry grass, dust, and the faint tank of last night's rain far to the east. In the quiet shadows of a granite outcrop, a narrow crack in the stone concealed a secret, the home of one of the most formidable creatures of the wild. Inside the dark hollow, 2 adult honey badgers lay curled around something far more precious than any stolen meal, their newborn cubs, barely the size of a human hand. The cubs were blind, their pink skin barely hidden beneath the thin fuzz of dark gray fur. The distinctive white mantle that one day would run boldly from the top of their heads to the tips of their tails was not yet visible. For now, they looked like fragile scraps of life, mewling softly, wriggling blindly in search of the warmth of their mother's body. The female honey badger, battle-scarred, yet radiating a fierce calm, adjusted her position to shield them from the cool morning draft that slipped into the den. Her nose twitched constantly, sampling the scents that drifted in from the outside world. A honey badger is never truly at rest. Even in the safety of her den, she remains alert, for danger in the African wild does not always announce itself. Her mate, a large male with a thick, muscular neck and the telltale streaks of old wounds along his flanks, rose briefly, shifting his weight to peer out through the crevice. His eyes scanned the savannah with the precision of a seasoned survivor. Somewhere far off, the low, resonant rumble of a lion rolled across the plains. A clan of hyenas laughed in the distance, harsh, mocking cries that carried a warning. Out here, everything that moves can be prey or predator, and often both. Within the den, the cubs squirmed, their tiny paws pressing against their mother's stomach. She responded with a deep, almost cat-like rumble, a sound of reassurance. Her tongue, rough but careful, groomed each cub, coating them with her scent, a scent that would become their first layer of defense against the unfamiliar. In the wild, smell is more than identification, it is survival. Outside, the world began to wake. The rising sun painted the savannah in shades of gold and amber. A herd of impalas grazed nervously at the edge of a thicket, ears flicking constantly to detect danger. Above them, a pair of tawny eagles rode the morning thermals, scanning for movement below. The honey badgers, hidden deep within their rocky fortress, remained invisible to most eyes. But invisibility was not their primary weapon. Their true strength lay in their unshakable will. The female shifted again, her claws scraping softly against the stone floor. Each claw was long, curved, and honed like a chisel, perfect for digging into termite mounds, tearing through bark, or raking across the hide of an enemy. Her cubs would one day inherit these weapons, but for now, they were helpless. It was her duty to protect them in these first fragile weeks, to feed them, and to prepare them for the brutal lessons that awaited beyond the mouth of the den. The male emerged briefly into the open air, stretching his body low to the ground before trotting a short distance to scent mark a nearby rock. His movements were deliberate, confident. He was not marking territory to keep others out. Honey badgers were more solitary than territorial, but to announce his presence in the wild, scent marks can serve as both a warning and a challenge. Predators like leopards and hyenas, upon catching the musky, pungent scent of a honey badger, often think twice before engaging. They know that the cost of a fight with this small, relentless warrior can be far greater than the reward. Back inside, the mother curled tightly around her young again. She had eaten nothing since the birth, surviving on stored fat and sheer endurance. Soon, she would have to leave the cubs hidden while she hunted, risking everything on the chance that they would remain undiscovered. For now, she savored these final days of quiet, aware that peace is rare and fleeting on the savannah. As the day warmed, the den grew stuffy, and the cubs stirred restlessly. She nuzzled them closer, encouraging them to feed. Tiny jaws latched onto her, and for a moment, the only sounds in the den were the muffled suckling of new life. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the brittle grass in waves, carrying with it the smells of the coming day, the musk of grazing antelope, the acrid tang of a snake's shed skin, and the faint, sweet scent of flowering acacia. The male returned, slipping silently back into the den's shadow. A brief exchange of scent and body language passed between the pair, a greeting, an affirmation, and perhaps a shared understanding of the dangers to come. They had seen enough seasons to know that raising cubs was a gamble against the odds, one often lost to predators, hunger, or accident. But honey badgers did not live by the fear of what might happen. They lived in the unshakable conviction that they would endure, no matter the challenge. Outside, the African sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the morning cool. The granite outcrop that shielded the den would soon be hot to the touch, the air shimmering with heat waves. The female knew she would need to venture out before midday to find food and water. The cubs, full-bellied and drowsy, nestled together in the shallow scrape of earth at the back of the den. She took one last moment to watch them, her black eyes reflecting a mixture of fierce love and hardened instinct. Beyond the rocky entrance lay the world, a place of lions, hyenas, venomous snakes, and endless competition for every scrap of life. But it was also a place of opportunity, where the quick-witted, the unyielding, and the brave could carve out their own survival. And the honey badger was all three. The wind shifted again, bringing with it the distant hum of bees. The female's head lifted, ears pricked, nose working. She knew that sound well. There would be honey nearby, rich, energy-packed, and worth every sting. She would find it soon enough. But first, the cubs needed her stillness, her warmth, her vigilance. For now, the dawn belonged to the den, to the fragile heartbeat of new life, and to the unspoken promise that no matter what awaited them beyond the safety of these stone walls, this family of honey badgers would face it with the same unyielding spirit that had made their kind a living legend. The African sun rose higher, burning away the mist and cloaking the savannah in a haze of shimmering heat. Days had passed since the cubs first opened their eyes to the dim light of the den. Now, they blinked with curiosity at the shifting shadows on the stone walls, their ears twitching at every sound. Their mother knew the time had come to let them experience the world beyond the safety of rock and earth. The den's entrance was a slit barely wide enough for her broad shoulders, yet just outside lay an endless expanse of life and danger. The female honey badger stretched her claws, scraping the stone floor with a rasping sound, then turned to nudge the cubs. They hesitated, tiny paws trembling on the packed earth, but the pull of the unknown was stronger than their fear. The first step was always the hardest. One cub placed a tentative paw into the shaft of light spilling into the den, recoiling as the warmth of the sun hit its sensitive pads. The mother stepped outside, glancing back, her black eyes commanding them to follow. Slowly, awkwardly, they emerged into the day. The savannah opened before them in a panorama of gold and shadow. Acacia trees, their branches twisted like arthritic fingers, dotted the horizon. Tall grass swayed in the hot breeze, whispering secrets in a language only the wind could understand. Insects whirred and clicked in the undergrowth. Every scent was new, every sound a puzzle to be solved. The mother led them only a few meters from the den, pausing often to scan the surroundings. Her sense of smell told her far more than her eyes ever could. She could detect the musk of a leopard that had passed by during the night, the faint ammonia temps of hyena urine, and the sweet trace of flowering shrubs in bloom. The cubs sniffed clumsily at everything, their noses wrinkling at the unfamiliar aromas. One cub found a beetle scuttling across the dust. With a clumsy swipe of its paw, it sent the insect tumbling. Instinct kicked in. The cub pounced, biting down. The beetle's shell cracked, releasing a bitter taste that made the cub recoil. Lesson 1. Not all prey is worth the effort. The mother wasted no time introducing Lesson 2. Awareness. She froze suddenly, ears angled toward a rustle in the grass. The cubs mimicked her stillness, though they did not yet understand the reason. A shadow passed overhead, the silhouette of a martial eagle riding a thermal current. The bird's vision could detect the smallest movement from hundreds of meters away, and to such a predator, a honey badger cub was an easy meal. The mother crouched low, ushering the cubs back toward the den until the shadow drifted away. For the next hour, she guided them through the basics of their new world. She showed them how to dig for termites in the sun-baked earth, using her powerful forelimbs to tear open the crust and reveal the frantic swarm beneath. The cubs mimicked her movements, their small claws scratching without much effect, but their eyes shone with fascination as she scooped up mouthfuls of writhing insects. The taste was strange, sharp, but nourishing. Then came the thorns. The cubs stumbled into a patch of wait-a-bit thornbush, yelping as the hooked spines clung to their fur. The mother did not rush to free them. Instead, she allowed them to struggle, to learn how to back away slowly, to avoid panic, and to use their paws and teeth to free themselves. The lesson was harsh, but necessary. Panic in the wild could be fatal. As the sun climbed higher, heat shimmered across the ground, and the air became thick and dry. The cubs panted, their pink tongues lolling. The mother led them to a shallow depression where rainwater had collected days before. She drank first, her muzzle rippling the surface, then stepped aside for them. The water was warm and muddy, but the cubs drank greedily. Suddenly, a faint buzzing reached the mother's ears. Her head lifted sharply. She recognized the sound. Bees. Her nose confirmed it. There was a hive nearby. The cubs followed her to a hollow in a fallen log. The smell of honey was intoxicating, thick and sweet. She began to dig into the wood, her claws sending splinters flying. Bees poured out in a furious cloud, stinging at her face and ears, but she ignored the pain. Her skin was thick, her fur dense, the stings barely penetrated. The cubs watched wide-eyed as she tore open the hive, exposing golden combs dripping with honey and fat white larvae. She licked up a mouthful, then nudged the cubs forward. They hesitated at first, confused by the sticky texture, but soon they were smearing their faces in the sugary treasure. Above them, bees still swirled, but the mother positioned herself between the swarm and her offspring, taking the brunt of the attacks. By midday, the lesson was over. The cubs were exhausted, their small legs wobbling with each step back toward the den. The mother ushered them inside, curling around them in the cool shadow. They would sleep deeply now, their dreams filled with the sights, scents, and tastes of their first morning in the wild. It had been only a few meters beyond the den's safety, but for the cubs, it was the first chapter in a lifetime of survival. They had learned to move cautiously, to recognize danger from above, to dig for food, and to endure pain for reward. Most importantly, they had begun to understand that in the life of a honey badger, fear was never an option. Only vigilance, resilience, and an unyielding will to face whatever lay ahead. And as they drifted into sleep, the African sun blazed on, indifferent to their small victories, knowing that greater trials awaited them just beyond the horizon. The sun dipped low behind the thorny silhouettes of acacia trees, casting long shadows across the savannah. The heat of the day was giving way to the cooler breath of evening. It was during this in-between time, when predators began to stir from their midday rest, that the female honey badger decided it was time for her cubs to face their next lesson, the art of the hunt. Until now, the cubs had learned only to forage for insects, taste honey, and avoid thorns. But survival in the wild meant more than scavenging. A honey badger was a predator, and even the smallest cub needed to learn how to catch living prey. Their mother knew this skill would be tested sooner than they imagined. She led them out of the den with a low grunt, her body low to the ground. The cubs, still clumsy but eager, followed her into the tall grass. The evening light turned the grass into a sea of bronze, rustling softly in the breeze. Every sound seemed amplified: the distant whoop of a hyena, the chirring of cicadas, the dry whisper of lizards moving underfoot. The mother's head tilted, her ears catching a faint sinuous rustle ahead. The cubs froze instinctively, sensing her tension. She moved forward in a slow, deliberate stalk, her paws silent against the earth. The rustle grew louder, accompanied by a faint hiss. Through the grass, a glint of pale scales caught the last light of the day. A snake. It was small, barely longer than the mother's body, but its movements were quick, defensive. The female honey badger knew this was the perfect practice target. She stopped a meter away and turned to the cubs, emitting a sharp, chuffing call. One cub crept forward hesitantly, the other hung back, eyes wide. The snake coiled, tongue flicking rapidly. The mother didn't attack. Instead, she circled, forcing the cub to face the threat. She snapped her jaws near the snake's head, not to kill, but to show the cub where to aim. The young badger lunged clumsily, snapping at the air as the snake struck and missed. The cub flinched, but didn't retreat. Its second attempt was bolder, though still uncoordinated. The snake's head darted forward again, narrowly missing its muzzle. With a sudden, precise movement, the mother pinned the snake's tail with one paw, immobilizing its retreat. She growled at the cub, urging it to act. The young badger darted in, teeth connecting with the snake's midsection. The reptile writhed violently, but the cub held on with surprising tenacity until the mother intervened, biting cleanly through the snake's neck. The body went limp. The cub panted, chest heaving, its fur spiked from adrenaline. It had tasted its first kill, small but significant. The mother tore the snake into sections, letting both cubs feed. She knew this was only the beginning. Many hunts would fail, but the instinct had been awakened. After the meal, the mother moved deeper into the grass, her nose sweeping side to side. Another scent caught her attention, richer, heavier. She quickened her pace, the cubs scrambling to keep up. Ahead, a burrow entrance yawned open in the earth. She sniffed the edge and began digging furiously. Dust and clumps of soil flew behind her in a spray, her claws churning like blades. The cubs joined in, though their smaller claws made little progress. From deep within came a frantic chittering. A family of ground squirrels burst from the tunnel, scattering in all directions. The mother lunged at one, but it zigzagged and vanished into the grass. She didn't seem frustrated. The point of this chase wasn't food, but to sharpen her cub's reflexes. One cub gave chase, darting after a squirrel until it lost sight of it. Panting, it returned to its mother, who licked its head approvingly. The savannah was darkening now, and the first stars appeared in the deepening blue above. The mother turned toward home, but the lesson wasn't over. She veered off the familiar path, leading the cubs to a termite mound. Its hardened surface glowed faintly in the moonlight. The mother began to dig at a weak point, prying open a small chamber. Warm, earthy air and the musky smell of termites poured out. The cubs pushed forward eagerly, biting at the exposed insects. Termites weren't dangerous prey, but they taught the cubs how to dig with purpose, to find the softest part of a structure, to keep working even when progress was slow. In the wild, patience could be just as deadly a weapon as speed. When the moon was high, they returned to the den. The cubs collapsed into the cool shadows, exhausted but buzzing with the day's lessons. In their short time outside, they had faced danger, learned to strike at a vulnerable point, to dig with focus, and to pursue prey even when success seemed unlikely. The mother curled around them once more, her eyes half closed but still watchful. She knew these skills were only the foundation. Soon the cubs would face greater challenges, prey that could fight back, predators that would not hesitate to kill them, and the endless hunger that ruled the lives of all who called the savannah home. Tonight, though, the cubs slept with the faint scent of snake blood still clinging to their fur, their dreams filled with flashes of movement in the grass and the thrill of the chase. They were no longer simply den-bound offspring. They had taken their first true steps toward becoming predators, and somewhere out in the darkness, the wild waited for them to prove themselves again. The savannah changes after dark. When the last embers of sunset fade and the horizon swallows the sun, the heat seeps away, replaced by a breathless coolness. The wind drops, and with it comes a silence so deep it seems as though the land itself is holding its breath. Then one by one the voices of the night rise, the low rolling roar of lions staking claim to their hunting grounds, the bone-chilling whoop of hyenas calling to their clan, the sudden sharp bark of a jackal somewhere in the dark. For a young honey badger, this is the most dangerous time to be outside the safety of the den. And yet, on this night, the female decides it is time. The cubs are growing stronger. They've learned to dig, to forage, to strike, to recognize danger. But the ultimate test of their instincts would come in the hours when the predators rule. Tonight, they would spend their first night away from the den, under the open sky, exposed to everything the wild can throw at them. She leads them out as twilight deepens into full night. The moon is a silver coin hanging low, casting pale light that pools in the open grass and vanishes in the deeper shadows. The cubs move close to her flanks, their bodies low, their ears swiveling at every sound. Even the rhythm of their breathing is cautious, measured. The female chooses her path carefully, avoiding open ground where an eagle owl might swoop down, and steering clear of the dense thickets where leopards wait in ambush. Her nose works constantly, sorting the flood of scents into what is harmless, what is promising, and what is deadly. A faint musky scent halts her in her tracks. Leopard, it's fresh, only minutes old. She gives a low, urgent grunt, and the cubs freeze. Their small bodies press against the earth, blending into the shadows. For a tense moment, the only sound is the distant chorus of frogs from a waterhole. Then, a shape moves across the moonlit clearing ahead. A leopard, its rosette-spotted coat rippling with each silent step. It passes within 20 paces, pausing once to lift its head and test the air. The wind is in the honey badger's favor. The predator moves on, melting into the darkness as if it were never there. Only when the scent fades does the female rise and lead her cubs onward. Lesson 1 of the night. In the dark, survival often means staying unseen. They stop in a shallow depression where the earth is soft, The female begins to dig, the cubs imitating her. The soil is cool and damp here, rich with the smell of burrowing insects. Soon, she uncovers a small colony of dung beetles working through a buried ball of elephant dung. The cubs snap at them clumsily, crunching through their hard shells. It is not a glamorous meal, but it is food, and food in the wild can't always be chosen. The moment is shattered by a sudden rustle in the grass to their right. The female turns sharply, her head low, lips peeling back to reveal sharp teeth. From the shadows emerges a black-backed jackal, its eyes glinting in the moonlight. It's alone, perhaps scouting for scraps or a chance to snatch a cub. The jackal takes 2 steps closer, ears forward, body tense. The female erupts into a furious charge, emitting a guttural growl that sounds far larger than her body. She darts left, then right, feinting to confuse the jackal. When she lunges forward, snapping her jaws, the predator startles and backs away. It hesitates, then retreats into the darkness, unwilling to risk a fight. The cubs stare wide-eyed as their mother returns, her body still bristling with adrenaline. Lesson 2 of the night. In the wild, intimidation can be as powerful as the fight itself. Hours pass, the moon climbs higher, the air grows colder. Insects hum in the grass, and somewhere far off, the whooping of hyenas grows louder. The female keeps moving, knowing that to stay in one place too long is to invite danger. The cubs follow without complaint, their small legs driven by the silent command of her presence. Near midnight, they come across a scent trail rich with possibility, the sweet, earthy smell of a rodent burrow. The female's digging is fierce, urgent, and soon a fat gerbil bursts from the hole. One cub gives chase, tumbling over its own paws in the excitement. The gerbil darts left, but the cub mirrors its movement, pouncing clumsily yet effectively. The squeal is brief. The cub looks up, the still body of its prey hanging from its jaws. The mother watches silently, then steps forward to take a share. This is no training exercise. This is real hunting. Lesson 3 of the night. Hunger sharpens skill faster than any practice. By the time the eastern horizon begins to pale, the cubs are staggering with exhaustion. The night has been a marathon of vigilance, evading a leopard, facing down a jackal, securing a kill. They are smeared with earth, fur matted from dew, but their eyes are brighter than ever. They have walked in the world of the night predators and returned alive. The mother leads them back toward the den as the first light spills across the land. The air smells different now, warmer, safer. Still, she remains alert until the stone walls close around them again. The cubs collapse instantly, curling into one another for warmth. She lies beside them, her gaze lingering on the entrance, as if daring the outside world to try again. Tonight, they had been tested, and though many more nights like this lay ahead, the cubs had taken a crucial step. They had learned that survival under the stars was a dance between stealth, aggression, and constant awareness. And in the honey badger's world, that dance never ends. The African dawn was quiet that morning, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, moving the grass in slow, uncertain waves. The honey badger cubs padded out of the den behind their mother, still stiff from the adventures of the night before. They were growing bolder, their noses constantly twitching at the smells of the savannah, their paws leaving small, neat prints in the dust. The mother was unusually alert. Her head swiveled more often, her nose lifted into the breeze, ears flicking to catch every vibration. She was hunting, yes, but her body language told another story. Today's lesson was going to be dangerous. The cubs didn't know it yet, but their lives were about to balance on the edge of a fang. The first sign they followed her, along a dry wash where the soil was cracked and pale under the morning sun. The air here felt heavier, as if carrying a weight the cubs couldn't name. She slowed suddenly. Her nose dipped toward the earth, then froze mid-step. Every muscle along her spine stiffened. The cubs, sensing the change, crouched instinctively, eyes wide. From ahead came a sound, soft, rhythmic, almost like cloth being pulled across sand. To the untrained ear, it was nothing. To a honey badger, it was the voice of one of the savannah's deadliest residents. The grass parted, and a shape emerged, long, fluid, and gleaming like polished bronze. A hood flared wide, black eyes fixing on the movement before it. The air between predator and prey seemed to tighten. A Cape cobra, coiled and ready, swayed like a dancer about to strike. The mother's calculation: most animals, on seeing that hood, would retreat without shame. not the honey badger, and certainly not this mother. She had fought such snakes before, and she bore the scars to prove it. But this time, the battle wasn't hers alone. She was going to let her cubs face the cobra, not to kill it, not yet, but to feel its speed, its precision, its lethal intent. She positioned herself at an angle, keeping the snake's gaze on her. Her low, guttural growl rippled through the dry air. One cub, the bolder of the two, stepped forward, ears flat. The other hung back, trembling but unwilling to flee. The cobra hissed, a long, cold exhalation. Its head weaved side to side, searching for the first opening. The mother's tail twitched once. It was a signal, unseen by the snake, understood by her offspring. The mistake: the cub lunged, but its timing was wrong. Too high, too slow. The cobra's body whipped forward, like a released bowstring. Fangs flashed, striking the cub's foreleg with surgical precision. The sound was soft, just the faint pop of skin pierced, but its meaning was loud and final. Venom had entered the cub's blood. The cub yelped and stumbled back, paw already swelling, confusion and pain clashing in its eyes. The world tilted beneath it. That was enough for the mother. She surged forward in a blur, claws raking, jaws snapping down on the cobra's neck just behind the head. The snake writhed violently, coils battering her flanks. She shook once, twice, and the body went slack. Venom's grip. The cobra's corpse lay in the dust, its mouth open, tongue slack. But the real fight was now inside the cub's body. Venom burned along the limb, swelling the flesh, leaving the paw awkward and heavy. The cub's breaths came faster, its pupils dilating. It sat down hard, as if the earth had suddenly grown too tall to stand on. The mother was at its side instantly, licking the wound, cleaning away dirt, and perhaps instinctively trying to draw out some of the venom. She nudged the cub toward the shade of a fallen log, forcing it to lie still. The other cub pressed against its sibling, their flanks touching. Minutes stretched into hours. The injured cub's breathing slowed. At times, its eyes closed for too long, its chest going still before jerking into motion again. The mother stayed pressed close, her eyes never leaving the open grass beyond their hiding place. Threats in the waiting predators can smell weakness, and the savannah wastes no opportunities. The first to arrive were jackals, two black-backed hunters slipping through the grass with the eager caution of thieves. They paused when they saw her, weighing the equation. A wounded cub was an easy kill, but between them and their prize stood a full-grown honey badger, shoulders bunched, teeth bared, rage already humming in her chest. She charged without hesitation, a short, violent sprint that sent them scrambling. The jackals vanished into the grass, but their scent lingered, a promise they'd be back if she faltered. The edge of darkness, the cub drifted between awareness and a strange, heavy sleep. In its mind, the world blurred into fragments, the hooded shadow rising, the snap of fangs, the burning flood in its leg. It felt cold even under the sun. The other cub licked its ear repeatedly, as if the simple rhythm could keep it tethered to life. The mother, still vigilant, tore the cobra's body into sections and pushed a piece toward the injured cub. At first it ignored it, but eventually hunger, or stubbornness, won. It chewed slowly, each swallow an act of will. By midday, the swelling in the leg was grotesque. The skin stretched tight and shiny, but sensation had returned to the paw, and with it came pain, sharp, undeniable, and oddly reassuring. Pain meant the limb was still alive. Recovery. The cub tried to stand. The first attempt failed, the leg folding beneath it. It waited, then tried again, lifting its body inch by inch until it could place weight, carefully, gingerly, on the paw. The mother did not rush it. She simply stood beside, a silent pillar of presence. When they finally moved, it was slowly, across the cooler sand of the dry riverbed, each step measured. The cobra's musk clung to their fur, a scent that told every predator they met exactly what had happened here. The lesson burned. By the time they reached the den at dusk, the cub was moving almost normally, though each step carried the ghost of the morning's pain. The bite marks had begun to scab, two small dark punctures that would fade with time, but never vanish completely. They were a brand, a reminder. For the cub, the cobra had been both enemy and teacher. It had learned the price of hesitation, the speed of death, and the resilience needed to pull away from the edge. For the mother, it had been another gamble survived. She curled across the den's entrance as the cub slept, eyes fixed on the dark beyond. Somewhere out there, another snake was weaving through the grass, another lesson waiting to be taught. And when it came, they would be ready. The sun had barely crested the far rim of the savannah when the scent found her, a thick iron-heavy perfume of fresh blood, meat, and dust. It rode the breeze in ragged pulses, as if tugged along by invisible threads. The mother honey badger paused mid-step, nose high, drawing it in until the picture formed in her mind. A kill. Recent enough that the heat of life still clung to it. The cubs were behind her, still limping in places from the venom lesson 2 days earlier, but curious as ever. They saw the way she froze, the way her ears locked forward, and they knew it meant food. Their tails lifted slightly in anticipation. But the scent was not alone. Weaved into it was another signature, heavy, feline, unmistakable. Lions. The kill was theirs. The gamble most would turn away. Lions are not just apex predators. They are territorial, short-tempered, and entirely capable of killing for sport. Yet for a honey badger, danger is only part of the calculation. Hunger tipped the balance. The mother looked at her cubs, one bold, one cautious, and then turned toward the wind. She moved with a low, deliberate lope, not the rush of a chase, but the measured gait of a hunter who knows every rise and hollow in the land. The cubs followed, slipping in her shadow. The scent grew stronger, thicker. Soon they began to hear it too, the wet tearing sounds of feeding, the grunt of effort as flesh was wrenched from bone. The scene they crested a low ridge, and saw it. In the shallow basin below, 2 lionesses crouched over the body of a young wildebeest. The carcass was still warm. Steam rose faintly from the opened belly. One lioness fed, head buried deep in the cavity, her shoulders rising and falling with each pull. The other sat a few meters away, licking her paws, her gaze scanning the grass in lazy sweeps. 3 lion cubs tumbled nearby, batting at a length of intestine, as if it were a toy rope. The smell of blood was overwhelming now, coating the inside of the nose, making the mouth water. The mother honey badger did not move yet. She crouched behind a knob of dirt, studying every rhythm of the scene. The feeding lioness's head dips, the play pattern of the cubs, the intervals between the scanning lioness's glances. She needed a gap measured in seconds, nothing more. Approach, she slid forward, each paw placed with surgical care. Her body was a smear of black and white against the shadow of the grass. The cubs behind her mimicked her crouch, though their inexperience showed in the way the grass swayed with their movement. 10 meters. 8-5. The feeding lioness shifted to tear at a new angle, her head twisting sideways. At the same moment, the scanning lioness turned to bat her own cub away from the carcass. It was the opening, the theft. The honey badger erupted from cover, a coiled spring unbound. In 3 strides she was at the wildebeest's flank, teeth sinking into a strip of meat and tendon. She pulled hard, bracing her forelegs, muscles standing out like cords under her fur. The tendon gave with a wet snap. The feeding lioness jerked upright, a low roar boiling from her throat. But the honey badger was already moving, dragging her prize sideways and away, her claws tearing furrows in the dirt for traction. The lioness lunged, but not far. Even in her anger, she hesitated. Lions know the reputation of honey badgers, foul-tempered, vicious fighters who aim for the eyes and genitals. A lion can kill one, yes, but not without risking injury. And for a predator, an injured leg or torn eye is a death sentence. The lioness stopped at the edge of the clearing, tail lashing. She roared again, more to save face than to pursue. The cubs shrieked in excitement, bounding after their mother with high, skipping strides. Retreat under pressure. They didn't stop running until they had ducked behind a broad, ancient termite mound half a kilometer away. The mother dropped the meat, a ragged strip heavy with fat, and stood over it until she was sure they weren't. He followed. Then she stepped aside. The cubs pounced on the prize, tearing at it with enthusiastic growls, their small faces smearing red. Bits of tendon snapped between their teeth. Each mouthful was more than food. It was an inheritance, the proof that cunning and nerve could feed them where strength alone might fail. The mother watched them eat, her breathing slowing. She was pleased, but not indulgent. They had seen only the success of the theft, not the line of danger she had walked to make it possible. That was the deeper lesson. Opportunity has a price, and in the wild, you must be willing to pay it without hesitation. Aftermath, when the meat was gone, she licked her jaws and set off again, moving in a looping route that kept the wind in her favor. She was careful to circle away from the lion's kill site. She had no intention of testing their patience twice in one day. As the sun climbed higher, they returned to the den. The cubs collapsed almost immediately, bellies distended, paws twitching in the half-sleep of the sated. The mother lay across the entrance, her ears still turning to track the far-off calls of the savannah. Back at the basin, the lionesses fed in peace again, unaware, or perhaps unwilling to admit, that they had been bested by a creature 1/10 their size. In the honey badger's world, size is not destiny. Nerve is, and that morning, Nerve had one. The heat of midday pressed down on the savannah like an invisible hand. The air shimmered above the baked earth, and the scent of dust seemed to cling to the skin. Most animals had retreated into shade, conserving their energy until the sun dipped again. But the mother honey badger was on the move, her nose sweeping the wind in restless arcs. The cubs followed sluggishly at first, their bellies still heavy from the stolen wildebeest meat of the day before. But their mother's urgency began to pull them along. There was something different about her movements today, less of the stalking precision she used for a hunt, more of a deliberate, searching pattern. She was looking for something, but not prey. The unlikely partner. A sudden flash of movement above caught her attention. A bird, fluttering in short, deliberate bursts between thorn trees. It was small, with brown and white feathers and a sharp, chattering call that seemed aimed directly at her. The mother froze, head tilted, ears forward. Then, with no hesitation, she turned and began following the bird's path. The cubs exchanged glances. This was no random pursuit. They had seen her follow scents, sounds, and tracks, but never a living creature that wasn't prey. The bird darted ahead, landing just long enough to call again, wings flicking impatiently. Every time the honey badger closed the distance, it would take off, always in the same general direction. The cubs began to notice something in the air now, a sweetness threaded through the dust and grass. The target revealed after nearly a kilometer of this strange chase. The bird landed in the fork of a half-fallen acacia tree and stayed there, hopping from branch to branch, calling insistently. The mother stopped at the base, nose lifted. The smell was stronger here, rich and heavy, honey, mingled with the sharper tang of wax and the faint, acrid edge of bee venom. The cubs craned their necks, and then they saw it. High in the fork of the tree, half hidden in a hollow, was a hive. The bird, a greater honey guide, had led them straight to it. The assault, the mother wasted no time. She reared up, sinking her claws into the tree trunk, and began to climb with surprising speed for her stocky frame. Bark flaked under her weight, but she held her grip, hauling herself toward the hollow. The cubs circled below, watching the sky as the first wave of bees poured out to meet the intruder. The mother ignored them. Her skin was thick, her fur dense. Stings could only pierce at the nose and around the eyes. Even there, pain was nothing compared to the reward. She jammed her front legs deep into the hollow, claws hooking the comb and tearing it free in great chunks. Golden honey spilled, dripping down her forelegs. Bees clung to her face, their bodies quivering with furious vibration. She shook her head violently, dislodging some, then went back to work. The feast, when she descended, her mouth and paws glistened with sticky amber. She dropped the comb pieces in front of the cubs, who hesitated only long enough to sniff before plunging in. Their small teeth tore into the wax, releasing the liquid sweetness inside. Above, the honey-guide bird flitted down to the ground, darting in to snatch bits of wax and larvae left behind. This was the bargain. The honey badger got the honey and larvae, the bird got the wax and scraps. Both species benefited, neither harmed the other. The cubs glanced up occasionally at the bird, still not understanding the strange partnership. But they would remember the connection. Bird calls could mean honey, and honey meant energy, survival, even in the leanest seasons. The departure when they had eaten their fill. The mother left the last fragments for the honey guide, a silent acknowledgement of the pact. She led the cubs away before the bees regrouped into a larger, more dangerous swarm. As they moved back toward the shade of a rock overhang, the bird's call faded behind them, replaced by the low drone of bees returning to salvage what they could. The cubs licked their paws as they walked, sticky fur catching the sun. The lesson. That day, the cubs learned something their kind had known for generations. Survival was not always about strength or speed. Sometimes it was about knowing who to listen to, when to trust, and how to make an ally out of something that might otherwise mean nothing at all. In the honey badger's world, Even a creature as solitary and fierce as their mother understood this truth. No one survives alone forever. And somewhere above them, the honey-guide bird circled once more before vanishing into the glare, already searching for its next fearless partner. The day began, like many others, with the scent of promise on the wind. The honey badger mother led her cubs along a faint game trail that wound between acacia stands and low termite mounds. Overnight, a light rain had fallen far to the west, and the air carried a sharp, clean edge. That freshness often brought movement in the grasslands, insects emerging, small mammals foraging, scents renewed and easy to follow. The cubs padded behind her, noses low, eyes sharp from the lessons of the past weeks. Every rustle was a possible meal, every shadow a potential threat. They had learned to read the savannah as a constant conversation of smells, sounds, and shapes. But not all dangers announce themselves in the language of the wild. Some are silent, hidden in plain sight, and bear the scent, not of predator or prey, but of humans. The lure, the mother's pace, slowed near a clump of thick grass, where the trail narrowed. A smell of meat drifted from within, rich, fatty, and fresh. Too fresh. Her instincts whispered caution, but the cubs, still young enough to be ruled by their stomachs, pressed forward eagerly. She circled once, sniffing the wind. The meat lay in a small clearing, barely larger than her own body, its redness almost glowing against the pale dust. No scavenger had touched it, no insect had landed. The silence here was wrong. The bold cub stepped forward. The mother gave a warning grunt, but the smell was too strong, too tempting. The cub took another step, and the ground beneath its paw shifted with a metallic snap. The trap springs, a wire loop, almost invisible against the dirt, tightened instantly around the cub's foreleg. The sudden constriction made it stumble and squeal in pain. The wire bit deeper as it struggled, pulling the leg into an awkward angle. Above, a thin rope anchored to a bent sapling quivered from the force of the catch. The mother's reaction was instant and explosive. She lunged to the cub's side, snapping at the wire, claws tearing at the dirt to expose its anchor. The trapped cub writhed, teeth bared in panic, the wire cutting further with every movement. The other cub hovered close, growling and confused. The smell of human metal and sweat was now obvious, sharp as rust in the nose. This was no natural danger. It was an ambush. The fight for freedom. The mother hooked her claws under the wire, pulling against the tension. Her teeth clamped on the loop, twisting, trying to widen it. But the metal was thin and strong, made to cut deeper the more it was pulled. She paused, breathing hard, then switched tactics. Using her forelegs like chisels, she dug furiously at the base of the anchor stake. Clumps of soil flew in a spray. The stake began to loosen, the wire slackening just enough for the cub to shift its paw. But the pain was fierce, and the cub's movements were clumsy. A sound on the wind made the mother's head snap up. The distant crunch of footsteps on dry earth. Human, they were coming to check the trap. She redoubled her effort, claws and teeth working in a blur. At last, the stake gave way with a sharp jerk. She seized it in her jaws and bit hard, the wood splintering. The wire went slack. The cub yanked its leg free, limping heavily but able to move. Blood streaked the fur around the wound, but the leg was still strong enough to bear weight. The retreat. There was no time to rest. The mother herded both cubs into the thickest patch of thorn scrub she could find, forcing their way in until the branches closed overhead like a woven wall. She crouched low, ears flat, her body covering the injured cub. Through the lattice of thorns, she saw them. Two men, moving quickly down the trail, eyes scanning the ground. One carried a stick with a hooked end, the other a small sack. They reached the sprung trap and cursed softly in their own language. The hookman prodded the dirt, searching for blood or fur, but the disturbed soil was scattered in all directions by the mother's digging frenzy. After a few minutes, they gave up and moved on, setting their gaze down the trail in hopes of easier prey. Aftermath. Only when their scents had faded from the wind did the mother move again. She led the cubs in a long, looping path back toward safer ground, avoiding all trails and open spaces. The injured cub limped but kept pace, jaw tight against the pain. Back at the den, she inspected the wound, licking it clean of dirt and blood. The wire had left a deep raw groove in the flesh, but the bone was unbroken. The cub lay down, breathing shallowly, while its sibling curled beside it in silent solidarity. The lesson that day. The cubs learned a truth older than their species. The Savannah's dangers do not all wear fur or scales. Some are built by hands, baited with scents that trick the nose and the hunger. Against these, teeth and claws are not always enough. Only cunning, vigilance, and a quick escape will save you. The mother, scarred from battles with lion and snake alike, added this new enemy to the map in her mind. She would smell such traps from farther away now, steer her cubs with sharper urgency. And the cub, nursing its wounded leg, carried a memory etched in wire, a reminder that the deadliest predators on the savannah sometimes walk on two legs. The moon had not yet climbed high enough to bleach the savannah when the mother honey badger led her cubs out of the den. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of night-blooming flowers, and laced with distant calls, the deep cough of a leopard, the rhythmic bark of jackals, and far off, a sound she recognized instantly, the manic, cackling laughter of spotted hyenas. Hyenas were scavengers, yes, but they were also skilled hunters, relentless and cunning in groups. The mother had faced them before and knew well their danger. Tonight, the sound was closer than she liked. Still, hunger pressed against caution. The wounded cub's leg, though healing from the snare, was growing stronger, and both young ones needed more than insects or grubs to keep pace with their mother's training. The smell of fresh meat on the wind was an opportunity, and a risk she was willing to weigh. The temptation they moved toward, the scent through a scattering of thorn scrub. In a shallow hollow, lit by a thin band of moonlight, lay the half-eaten carcass of an impala. The ribs stood like pale bars, the meat along the flanks torn ragged by teeth. The cubs' eyes shone at the sight. Their mother approached cautiously, nostrils flaring, checking the air for the owners of the kill. It was still warm. That meant whoever had brought it down might be close, or might be on their way back. She gave a low grunt, and the cubs began tearing at what meat remained. She stood watch, her head swiveling constantly, every sound dissected for threat. The warning came as a change in the wind. A new scent, musky and sharp, carried into her nose just seconds before the sound followed. The quickening rhythm of padded feet, several sets, closing fast. The laughter came next, higher now, overlapping voices, like madmen arguing in the dark. 3 hyenas broke into the hollow, their spots dappled by moonlight, their eyes reflecting cold fire. The mother honey badger rose instantly, body low, shoulders high, lips peeled back to show her teeth. She was outnumbered 3-1, but in her mind the math was simple. If she ran, the cubs would die. The standoff. The lead hyena, larger than the others, its muzzle dark with old scars, stepped forward, head low, tail stiff. Its jaws opened, showing the bone-crushing tools inside. The other 2 fanned to the sides, a flanking maneuver to box her in. She growled, a low, vibrating sound that carried no fear. Her cubs froze behind her, wide-eyed but silent. The lead hyena lunged first, aiming not at her but at the cubs. She intercepted with a sideways rush, slamming her shoulder into its chest. Her claws raked across its foreleg, and she snapped at its face. The hyena jerked back, startled by the ferocity of such a small opponent. Chaos, the second hyena, darted in from her flank. She spun, jaws snapping, catching it high on the cheek. The yelp was sharp, cut off as it scrambled back. The third tried to use the moment to circle toward the cubs, but the injured one let out a shrill, rattling growl that bought just enough hesitation for the mother to reposition. The hyenas began to press harder, testing her from different angles. She moved constantly, never letting them find a clear path. Her growls deepened into sharp, barking snarls. When one came close enough, she darted forward in a short, vicious charge, forcing it to backpedal or take damage. But she was tiring. Each feint, each lunge, was a drain on her strength, and the hyenas knew it. The turning point, the lead hyena made its move, rushing in with jaws open wide. Instead of meeting it head-on, she dropped low at the last second, letting its momentum carry it over her. As it stumbled, she whipped her head upward, teeth sinking into the soft underside of its throat. The hyena shrieked, jerking back, blood spraying into the dust. The sudden injury broke the pack's rhythm. The 2 uninjured hyenas hesitated, exchanging quick glances in the moonlight. The lead, bleeding and furious, backed away, its courage dampened by the pain in its neck. The retreat, one by one, they pulled back, snarling but unwilling to take further risk. The mother didn't chase. She knew the danger of overextending against a group that could turn again at any moment. She simply held her ground, body taut, until the last of their scent began to fade on the wind. Only then did she turn to her cubs. Both were alive, unbitten, though trembling with adrenaline. She nudged them toward the impala carcass, letting them snatch a few final mouthfuls before they left. The lesson that night: the cubs learned the meaning of standing ground, and of reading an enemy's will. They saw that size did not guarantee victory, but neither did ferocity guarantee safety. It was the constant shifting between threat and opportunity, between holding the line and striking without hesitation, that turned survival into dominance. As they moved away under the moon, the injured hyena's distant growl rolled after them, low and grudging. It would remember the little striped shape that had taken its blood and denied it an easy kill. And the cubs would remember that even the wildest, most feared hunters could be made to back away, if you were stubborn enough to refuse defeat. The dry season was ending. For weeks, the sky had been a hard, colorless dome, the wind carrying only dust and the brittle rattle of dead grass. But now, clouds were gathering, slow, towering giants edged in silver, and the air held the thick, electric scent that came before rain. The honey badger mother moved differently these days. Her steps were heavier, her flanks slightly rounder. The cubs, now nearly a year old, could keep pace with her, but they noticed the subtle change in her rhythm. She no longer ranged as far from safe ground, and her hunting was precise, focused on high-calorie kills. Something inside her was shifting. Another season was coming, one she had lived through before. She was going to bring new life into the world, and with it would come a different kind of battle. Finding the den, a birthing den, was not just a shelter. It was a fortress. She spent days searching, nose close to the ground, checking old burrows abandoned by aardvarks, warthogs, or porcupines. Each potential den was inspected with almost obsessive care. She would enter, vanish into the darkness, then emerge minutes later, her fur dusted with earth, eyes sharp with calculation. The perfect den needed more than a roof. It had to have narrow entrances, small enough to keep out larger predators. It needed an escape tunnel, because in the savannah, even a fortress could be breached. And it had to be close to water and hunting grounds, yet hidden enough to avoid drawing attention. At last, she found it, a collapsed termite mound, hollowed into a low, twisting chamber beneath a stand of thornbush. The soil was firm, the smell of other animals long gone. She began to work immediately, widening the main chamber, deepening the side tunnel, and packing the floor smooth. Her claws, built for ripping bark and tearing flesh, were just as skilled at reshaping the earth. A shift in temperament as the days passed. Her behavior grew more aggressive. Where before she might avoid unnecessary fights, now she challenged intruders with sudden ferocity. A jackal wandering too close received a snarl and a charge that sent it tumbling away. A young monitor lizard crossing her path was seized and killed with a quick neck bite, not for food, but to remove it as a potential threat to the den. Even her older cubs, now nearly adult in size, kept a respectful distance when she was in this mood. They were allowed to stay near the den, but every step they took inside was met with a watchful stare. The message was clear. This space was sacred, and she was its guardian. The first rains, when the first storm broke, it came with a force that seemed to split the sky. Sheets of water hammered the earth, turning the air into a curtain of silver. The smell of the rain was rich, alive, the scent of roots waking, of insects swelling with new life, of prey animals growing restless. The honey badger mother sat just inside the den's mouth, watching the rain flood the world outside. Lightning flickered in her eyes. Somewhere deep inside her, the slow rhythm of her heartbeat had synced with another, tiny, steady, and growing stronger with each passing day. The older cubs' role, her year-old cubs, were on the edge of independence now. They had learned to hunt snakes, to face down hyenas, to escape human snares. Soon, they would drift away to claim their own territories, driven by instincts as old as their bloodline. But for now, they served as her second set of eyes and ears. When she rested in the den, they patrolled nearby trails, their noses alert for the scent of leopards or lions. At night, they slept curled near the entrance, forming a living barricade against anything that might approach. They didn't fully understand why she had become more territorial, more intense, but they responded instinctively to her mood, growing sharper themselves, ready for trouble. The vigil weeks passed. Her movements grew slower, her foraging trips shorter. She was careful with her energy now, eating as much as she could and resting often in the cool earth of the den. Every sound outside was met with silence inside, her body freezing until she could identify it: the rolling bark of a kudu, the far-off roar of a lion, the slow hiss of a python moving through wet grass. Danger never stopped circling, and she never stopped listening. The cubs sensed the coming change. They stayed close, sometimes lying with their muzzles on her flank, ears twitching at the faint movement beneath her skin. The day arrives, one heavy, overcast morning. She retreated deep into the main chamber, and did not come out. The older cubs paced near the entrance, restless. They could hear her low, rhythmic breathing, broken by occasional grunts. The air inside was warm, thick with the smell of her musk and something else, a raw, living scent that carried the promise of new voices in the den. Hours later, the sounds changed. Small mewling cries joined the steady rhythm of her breath. The older cubs pressed their ears to the dirt, listening as the family they had known shifted into something new. When the mother finally emerged, the fur along her flanks was damp, her eyes bright but tired. She left only for moments, to scent the wind and scan the world beyond, before slipping back inside. Behind her, in the darkness, the new generation stirred. Tiny bodies, blind and helpless, but alive. The season turns outside, the rains continued, the grass grew tall, and the world smelled of green things in abundance. But inside the den, the air was warm and close, filled with the sounds of feeding, the rustle of small movements, and the low, constant hum of a mother's watchfulness. The cubs, she had raised for a year, would soon leave, carrying the lessons she had given them into their own fierce, solitary lives, and the newborns would begin their own journey, starting with the safety of this hollow under the earth, before one day facing the same wild, merciless world. The mother lay curled around them all, old cubs at the edge, new cubs at her belly, the embodiment of both protection and danger. In the honey badger's world, life was never still. Seasons turned, prey grew and vanished, threats shifted like the wind, but her role was constant: to fight, to teach, to endure. And now, with the storms drumming above and the warmth of new life against her, she was ready to begin again. The rains had brought a thick, living green to the savannah. Grass grew high enough to hide antelope to the shoulder, and the air swarmed with insects. The honey badger mother's new litter, blind mewling bundles of fur, lay deep within the den's main chamber. Their tiny lungs breathed in the heavy scent of damp earth and their mother's musk. Outside, the older cubs still lingered, not yet ready to break from her territory. They patrolled the thorn scrub and dry gullies near the den, practicing their hunting, but they also served as a first line of alarm. And one humid morning, that alarm came. The first warning: the bold older cub was the first to sense it. A strange, dragging sound, too heavy for a monitor lizard, too slow for a mammal on four legs. The smell followed, a musky, reptilian thickness in the air, sour and metallic all at once. The cub's hackles rose. It gave a short, sharp grunt toward its sibling and the den entrance. The mother appeared almost instantly, her body tense. She knew the scent: a giant African rock python, the largest constrictor in the region. The threat for a predator like the python, a honey badger cub, was an easy meal. It could swallow something half its body weight without effort, and with her newborns unable to defend themselves, the python's presence was more than an intrusion. It was an existential threat. The sound of scales over wet grass grew louder. Then, the head appeared, wide, triangular, with dull gold eyes that seemed to see everything and nothing at once. Behind it came the thick, muscular body, patterned in brown, black, and olive, moving with a slow, inevitable grace. The python paused, tongue flicking, tasting the air. It was following the warm, living scent toward the den. The ambush plan: the mother didn't wait for it to get closer. She dropped into a low crouch, circling wide through the grass, using her small size to vanish between stalks. She wasn't going to meet the python head-on at the entrance. That would risk letting it block her from getting inside to the newborns. Instead, she would hit it from the side, away from the den mouth. The older cubs understood without words. One stayed close to the den to guard, while the other flanked in the opposite direction, ready to distract if the python turned. The clash: the mother struck first. She launched herself from the grass with a guttural snarl, jaws aiming for the python's thick neck just behind the head. Her teeth sank into the scaly armor, scraping but not yet breaking through. The python reacted in an instant. Its body whipped sideways, coils snapping toward her with terrifying speed. One loop caught her midsection, another her hindquarters, tightening in a heartbeat. The pressure crushed her lungs, the air hissing out of her. But honey badgers do not yield. She bit harder, twisting her head like a wrench. Her claws raked the python's scales, searching for the softer underbelly. The older cub darted in from the flank, snapping at the snake's tail to break its focus. The python loosened for a fraction of a second. Enough. The mother tore herself free of the coil, rolled clear, and lunged again, this time targeting the head directly. Her teeth clamped over the python's jaw hinges, cutting deep into the muscle. The killer python thrashed, its entire body a whip of raw power. Dust and grass exploded around them. But the honey badger's bite was relentless. She shook violently, tearing at the connective tissue until the python's head sagged. With a final decisive wrench, she severed the brainstem. The massive body spasmed once, twice, then went still, its coils slack in the grass. Aftermath, the older cubs approached cautiously, their sides heaving from the tension of the fight. The mother stood over the snake's head, sides rising and falling, her muzzle wet with blood. She let the python's body lie stretched in the grass, longer than 3 badgers nose to tail. She dragged the kill a few meters from the den before beginning to feed, starting at the soft, nutrient-rich internal organs. The older cubs joined her, while the newborns slept on, unaware of how close death had come. The lesson that day: the older cubs saw their mother fight something that outweighed her many times over, that could have crushed the air from her lungs in seconds. They saw that speed and ferocity could match brute strength, and that in defending her young, the honey badger would face down even the most relentless of killers. The python had come as a shadow, silent and patient, but it had left as nothing more than another story in the blood-soaked ledger of their mother's survival. And in the still air after the fight, the only sound was the steady breathing from deep inside the den, the fragile, oblivious rhythm she had fought so savagely to protect. The rains did not last. The clouds that once rolled in heavy and black now drifted thin and white across a glaring sky. The grass that had grown high and lush began to yellow, bending under its own dryness. Waterholes shrank into muddy pits where herons picked at stranded fish. The air grew still, and with it came a silence that felt unnatural. The absence of insect swarms, the fading calls of frogs, the thinning chatter of birds. For the honey badger mother, this was the beginning of the hardest season of all. The drought. Prey would grow scarce, competition fiercer. Every trip outside the den would carry greater risk, and every mouthful of food would cost more energy to find. A lean land by the 3rd week without rain, the savannah had changed. The soil was hard as baked clay. The smell of green things had vanished, replaced by dust and the faint musk of desperation. Antelope herds moved restlessly from one empty grazing patch to another. The predators followed them, but even lions were thinner now, their ribs showing under tawny skin. For the honey badger mother, the newborns inside the den meant she could not roam far. The older cubs, now close to independence, were her foraging partners, but even they were returning empty-pawed more often than not. The search for food one dawn. She left the den before the sun's first light, padding silently through the brittle grass. Her nose sought the faintest traces of prey, a whiff of rodent musk, the acid tang of snakeskin, the oily scent of insect nests underground. Hours passed with nothing. A few beetle grubs hidden under a fallen log, a handful of termites, enough to keep her moving, not enough to satisfy. The heat rose quickly, burning the back of her neck. By midday, she found a faint trail of scent that made her mouth water. The thick, dry musk of a porcupine. It was a dangerous choice. Quills could pierce deeply and fester, but in the hunger of drought, danger was part of the price. The risky hunt, she tracked the porcupine to a shallow burrow under a stunted acacia. The scent was fresh, the earth still soft where it had dug. She began to claw at the entrance, her thick forelegs throwing dirt behind her. The older cubs waited on either side, ready to block an escape. When the porcupine burst out, it came in a blur of bristling quills. The mother dodged sideways, lunging for its face, the one place its armor could not protect. Her teeth found flesh just above the nose, and the animal squealed, thrashing to dislodge her. The cubs darted in, snapping at its flanks. It was over in minutes, but the fight left her with 2 short quills lodged in her shoulder. She ignored them for now. The family fed quickly, tearing through the porcupine's thick hide to reach the rich meat beneath. The water problem meat kept the body going, but without water, even the strongest predator would falter. The nearest permanent waterhole was a full day's journey away. Impossible for the mother to reach without leaving the newborns vulnerable for too long. Instead, she relied on the small hidden reserves the drought hadn't claimed yet. A hollow in a shaded rock that still held rainwater, the root of a certain succulent plant that bled cool moisture when chewed the condensation that formed on leaves before sunrise. She drank sparingly, and the older cubs learned to do the same. A night raid, one moonless night, she took a bigger risk. She followed the scent of rotting flesh to the outskirts of a hyena clan's territory. There, the half-buried remains of an old wildebeest kill lay under the dust. The smell was foul, the meat tough and crawling with insects, but to a honey badger in drought, it was a banquet. She dug into the carcass, ignoring the stench, pulling free strips of meat hardened like leather. The cubs ate beside her in frantic silence, ears twitching at every sound. Twice, distant hyena calls made them freeze, but the mother did not stop until she had eaten her fill and the cubs' bellies were round. They left quickly, vanishing into the night, just as the cackling laughter of the returning hyenas rolled over the plain. The toll of the season. By the drought's second month, the older cubs had grown lean and wiry. Their muscles were harder, their movements sharper. Hunger had stripped away the last of their youthful clumsiness. The mother had lost weight too, but her eyes were still bright, her movements still powerful. The scars on her muzzle and shoulders told the story of her choices. Every quill, claw mark, and bite taken in the pursuit of keeping her family alive. Inside the den, the newborns grew slowly, still dependent on her milk. The older cubs brought back what food they could, a fat lizard here, a clutch of eggs there, and the mother accepted it without judgment. The drought was a teacher for them as much as it was for her. The promise of change one evening, as the sun sank in a haze of dust, the wind shifted. It carried a smell she had not scented in weeks. Wet earth, faint but undeniable. Far to the west, dark clouds massed again, lightning flickering at their edges. The drought would not end tonight, maybe not even this week, but the scent was enough. She knew the rains would return, and with them would come abundance. Until then, she would do what she had always done: fight, adapt, and endure. Because for the honey badger, survival was not about waiting for the right season. It was about living through the wrong one. By the time the rains finally broke the drought, the honey badger mother was no longer just another predator in the vast sprawl of the African savannah. She had become a story. The first heavy storm came at night. Rain hammered the ground in a deafening roar, washing the dust from every surface, turning gullies into rushing brown streams. The parched soil drank greedily, and by dawn the air was thick with the smell of wet earth, grass beginning to stand upright again, and insects bursting from their hidden chambers. For most animals, the rains meant relief. For the honey badger, it meant movement and opportunity. The season of scarcity had honed her to a razor edge. Now, with food plentiful again, she could act without restraint. Whispers in the wind, the older cubs had finally left, driven by instinct to carve out their own territories. They vanished in different directions, each carrying scars, skills, and the fierce independence she had given them. Only the newborns remained, still small and clumsy, but growing stronger by the day. It was in this time that her name began to spread, not in human tongues, but in the unspoken language of the wild. Among the jackals, she was the striped shadow, the one who had stolen meat from under a lioness' nose. Among the hyenas, she was the scarred thief, the creature who had drawn blood from their leader and walked away unbroken. To the snakes, if snakes could hold such thoughts, she was the venom eater, the warm-blooded thing that killed and consumed their kin without dying. Encounters, the stories were kept alive, not by imagination, but by repeated proof. One morning, a lone cheetah crouched over a freshly caught spring hare near the edge of her territory. The honey badger approached without hesitation, a low growl vibrating from her chest. The cheetah, built for speed, and not for wrestling with madness, abandoned its kill after one sharp bark of warning. She took the hare back to her cubs, the scent of the cheetah still clinging to the fur. Another evening, she wandered into the edge of a small human village. The smell of chickens and stored grain drew her, but so did something else: the sour, sharp tang of fear. Dogs barked from behind makeshift fences, their hackles up. One brave mongrel broke free and charged, snapping at her hindquarters. She wheeled, catching it across the muzzle with a swipe of her claws that left the dog yelping and retreating. By dawn, the villagers found chicken feathers scattered in the dust and claw marks on the wooden coops. In the weeks that followed, her paw prints became a quiet warning stamped in the mud outside their homes. The predator's code: she didn't kill for sport, nor out of malice. Every fight, every theft, every act of aggression was guided by the same truth: survival first. She took only what she needed, but she took it without apology. Predators who learned this truth about her adjusted their behavior accordingly. Young hyenas gave her a wide berth. Leopards hesitated longer before approaching her kills. Even the lions, whose power dwarfed hers, sometimes chose the easier path of ignoring her rather than risking injury over a few stolen mouthfuls. The new generation learns. Her newborns were growing fast, their eyes open now, their first teeth sharp against her fur when they nipped in play. She began taking them on short foraging trips, showing them how to test the wind, how to dig for hidden food, and how to read the language of tracks. One cub learned faster than the other, darting ahead to sniff and paw at every scent. The slower one hung back, cautious but observant. She taught them both with the same relentless patience, correcting with a swat or a low rumble when they made mistakes. In these trips, they met the animals who already knew her reputation. More than once, a predator yielded a carcass at the mere sight of her white-striped back in the grass. The cubs didn't yet understand that they were eating on the strength of their mother's name, but they would be quiet power of a name. The Savannah had no laws, no written history, no monuments. What lasted were the stories passed from one generation to the next, carried in scent, sound, and the cautious glances exchanged between species. The honey badger mother had become one of those stories, a living reminder that survival is not about size or strength alone, but about the will to face anything, to take what you need and hold it against all odds. Looking ahead, seasons would change again. Drought would come, and with it, hunger. Predators would rise and fall, territories would shift, and her cubs would one day leave to forge their own paths. But for now, the rains had filled the rivers, the land was green, and her name, whether spoken in the growl of a hyena or the chatter of a bird, carried far across the grasslands. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in the mind of every creature that had heard of her, the thought remained the same: if you see the striped shadow in the grass, think twice. The savannah was in its prime. The rains had ended weeks ago, leaving behind a mosaic of tall grasses, scattered wildflowers, and full-bellied rivers that cut silver lines through the land. Herds of impala and wildebeest grazed in restless clusters, their flanks shining in the sun. Birds wheeled in the sky, following the trails of insects that swarmed over the green. For the honey badger mother, this was the height of her reign. She moved through her territory with the confidence of an animal who had survived every trial the wild could conjure: lion hunts, snake strikes, human snares, and the starvation of drought. Now, she was strong, well-fed, and feared. Her two young cubs trailed her, not yet grown, but already carrying themselves like predators who understood their place. They were learning in a land that knew her name, and in this moment, she was the undisputed apex of her range, the borders of power. Her territory was not marked by fences or boundaries on a map, but by scent, pungent musk rubbed on tree roots, scat left deliberately in the center of trails, claw marks carved into termite mounds. These were her warnings, and the animals who lived nearby knew to read them well. At the eastern edge, hyenas sometimes tested her patience, wandering too close. In the north, a young male leopard had once tried to steal her kill. He carried the scar above his eye as a reminder of how quickly that mistake had been punished. Predators twice her size gave her space, not because they couldn't overpower her, but because the cost of trying wasn't worth it. The honey badger didn't just fight, she fought to wound, to blind, to cripple, and in the wild, an injury could be the slowest death of all. The patrol at dawn, she moved through her range in long, looping circuits. The cubs followed, their small paws placing themselves into her larger tracks without thinking. She stopped often, not out of fatigue, but to examine the signs of her domain. A turned-over stone might reveal a scorpion to eat. A disturbed patch of grass could mean a trespasser had passed through. When she found the scent of a jackal along the southern gully, she didn't ignore it. Instead, she followed it until she found the animal nosing at an old warthog burrow. She charged, low and fast, growl ripping through the still air. The jackal yelped and bolted, not daring to test her fury. The cubs watched closely. They were learning that a territory wasn't just land, it was a statement, a living claim that had to be enforced every single day. The midday challenge. It was during one of these patrols that she met her boldest challenger of the season, a young male lion, newly separated from his pride, hungry and reckless. He had caught the scent of her porcupine kill and decided it should be his. When she rounded a curve in the riverbank, he was there, crouched over her meal, the spines of the porcupine scattered around his paws. His golden eyes met hers with the arrogance of youth. The cubs froze, instinctively backing toward the cover of thorn scrub. The mother did not back away. She approached in a slow, deliberate walk, head low, shoulders rolling. The lion growled, deep and resonant, but she answered with a guttural snarl that carried no hesitation. The standoff lasted seconds. Then, in a blur, she lunged, aiming for his foreleg. The lion reared back, startled by the sudden ferocity. She pressed forward, snapping at his face. He swiped once with his paw, a blow that could have broken her ribs if it had landed fully, but she twisted aside, teeth flashing. Realizing the fight would not be easy, and that the porcupine's meat was hardly worth injury, the lion backed away, tail flicking in frustration. The cubs emerged only when the lion's scent had faded. They found their mother standing over the kill, her breathing steady, her eyes sharp as ever. The quiet rain. By late afternoon, she returned to the den. The cubs slept, curled in the shade, bellies full. Outside, the air was heavy with the smell of grass warming in the sun, the distant rumble of elephants moving toward water. From her place at the den entrance, she could see almost to the horizon, her land, her hunting grounds, her legacy. Every scar on her body was a story written into the soil she patrolled. Every predator that gave her space was a chapter in her legend. She was not the largest, nor the fastest, but she was the one who endured. In the balance of life and death that ruled the savannah, that endurance was the sharpest weapon of all. The years had carved their mark into her body. The honey badger mother's muzzle, once a clean black mask, now carried streaks of pale gray. The scars across her shoulders and flanks were deeper, some fur never growing back. Her gait was slower than in her prime, but every step still carried the deliberate weight of a predator who knew exactly who she was and what she had survived. Her territory was smaller now. She no longer ranged as far as she once did, focusing on the best hunting grounds and the safest water sources. Yet the borders still carried her scent, and few dared to test them. Lions passed wide. Hyenas skirted the southern gully. Even leopards gave her a respectful berth. The last litter, that season, she gave birth for the final time. Only two cubs survived the first critical weeks. She guarded them with a ferocity that had not dimmed with age. Every lesson she had learned, from the droughts, the battles with snakes and hyenas, the thefts from lions, she began to pass down in measured, deliberate encounters. She taught them to dig where the earth was softest, to test the wind before approaching a scent, to never underestimate a still shadow in tall grass. She led them to honey hives, letting them take the first bites. She showed them how to intimidate without wasting energy, how to read an opponent's will and strike only when necessary. The cubs grew quickly, sleek and confident, their white striped backs already visible from a distance like living banners. The final battle. It came one overcast afternoon when a pack of wild dogs, lean, desperate, and driven by hunger, pushed into her territory. She was returning from a hunt with the cubs when she caught their scent. The dogs moved in a loose arc, cutting off escape routes with military precision. In her prime, she might have fought them outright. Now, she used every bit of cunning in her arsenal. She led them toward a narrow rock chute she knew well, its walls too close for the dogs to maneuver. There, she turned and stood her ground, her body a wall between the predators and her cubs. The first dog lunged. She met it with a low, brutal bite to the shoulder, forcing it to yelp and recoil. The second snapped at her hind leg. She twisted, raking its muzzle with her claws. The pack circled for several tense minutes before breaking. Injuries were too costly, and the will in her black eyes told them the fight would not be worth the prize. They melted back into the grass, leaving her to lead her cubs home. The departure. When the cubs were nearly grown, instinct began to pull them away. One night, without ceremony, they left. The den was empty, but for her, the air still carrying their scent. She lay at the entrance, watching the stars, feeling the strange ache of absence, but also the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had left ready. In the months that followed, she slowed further. Hunts took more time. Rest lasted longer, but her mind was still sharp. She avoided fights unless forced, but when the moment came, she struck with the same precision she always had. The passing of a legend one evening, after a day of foraging along the dry riverbed, she returned to the den and lay down at its mouth. The wind was cool, carrying the smell of rain far to the west. She closed her eyes, her body sinking into the earth she had defended all her life. No predator came that night, no danger stirred. In the quiet hours before dawn, her breathing slowed, her body finally yielding to the years. The immortal in memory by morning, her scent would fade from the den, but her story would not. The cubs she had raised, scattered now across the savannah, would carry her lessons in every hunt, every fight, every decision made in the face of danger. In the language of the wild, she remained alive in every animal that turned away at the sight of a white-striped back in the grass. Among the lions, she was remembered as the thief who stood her ground. Among the hyenas, as the scarred fighter who would not yield. Among the snakes, as the one who bit back and won. And in the rustle of grass at dusk, in the low growl that stops a predator mid-step, in the unblinking stare that warns not today, the legend of the honey badger mother walked on. Because in the savannah, immortality does not come from how long you live, but from the way the land remembers you.